Okay, next question is from Sharon. What is your take on the Lynden Millard? Any evidence linking this to the Essex Boys?
Well, I've answered that historically, and I'll just say it briefly again. I'm intrigued about that. Her partner, I would like to know where he was on the 6/7th. He did have a house literally round the corner from where Rogers, the farmer who had the fuselage shots gone midnight, lived. He is on intelligence. He was into criminality. He's now dead, so we can talk about him. I think his name was...
Can't remember.
Was it? I've got his name. So he was...
Is that the bald fella?
Ball, that's it, Terry Ball. That's it, Ball. So he had a house, I think, also down in Swanage, and there's and Lynden Millard is reported missing. Her car was found on a Bristol, on the Bristol River, you know, the River Severn. So she found with her shoes in the back of the car and nothing else. She hasn't been seen since. So she is presumed dead, and I think she is dead. And she gave evidence to her friend to say that she overheard the conversation and the door was shut by Terry Ball. My understanding, if I remember rightly, is that she was down in Dorset when this happened, but could it have been up in the Essex area, i.e. Down there where Rogers lived? So was he actually up there at the time? I haven't had the satisfaction of speaking to an officer in the case. There is a missing person report in, and the reporter has come back to me, but I haven't got any fresh information on it. So it is a line of inquiry that isn't really going to take us any further, because both people are dead, in my honest opinion. So now it ain't going to take us anywhere, unless... No, there's not. Yeah, unless the officer who took the missing person inquiry can say something or remember something. So there's that. It's one of those which probably may not be connected, but you know it's not going to take us anywhere evidentially. But interesting, you know, it could well be connected, only because of where they were living at the time. You know, it was in the same locality.
Okay, next question from Wayne Holland. The empty crisp packet and topic wrappers in the back of the Range Rover, what happened to them? Were they not tested for DNA?
Exactly why we need a fresh forensic review, sit round the table, what's been done, what hasn't. You saw them in the photographs. There's lots of things that you know I've raised already, so we don't know the answer to that.
Okay, next one from Ricky Harrison. If the three were killed at 6:44 and it snowed after, why were the cartridges found not covered by the snow? Does this carry any weight to prove they were killed after midnight?
That's a good question, and it's all about how do you prove how much snow actually fluttered down the farm track, i.e. Workhouse Lane, and you know some officers say they never saw anything, you know, and how much of the snow is melted down if the cartridge case went into the snow upright, as you can see two have, how far down the cartridge, how high up was the snow yeah, in relation to that. And bear in mind, it's landed in foliage. It's not landed in soil or anything like that. It's landed in grass, I think, if I remember rightly. So again, that's another reason we need to sit around the table. The people who are experts, who probably do it every day of the week, need to give a profession. I know David's asked Mr. Boyce his opinion, but it actually needs other people to talk around what could have happened here, please. And the answer to that is, there's questions need answering. I honestly don't know why. And it's the same with the frost, isn't it? There is an answer to the frost for 7 o'clock, but not at midnight for me. Adrian Runacre. So intriguing.
I think the point is that, you go back to, is that we don't believe they were killed at the time of Darren Nichols' says, 1848, 1859. So the thing that keeps getting thrown in the ether around this is why were there no phone calls? This is a really important point.
Yep.
Why were there no phone calls after 7 o'clock? That's the thing always gets thrown. If Tucker and Tate and Rolfe were alive, as you say they were, up until midnight, where were they and why were there no phone calls? So just very quickly to try and cover that. It's not quick.
It's not quick, and you've got to listen carefully.
Tony Tucker's phone was analogue.
Correct.
If he received a call and answered that call, it would not show on the phone data. It does not show on the phone data, right? That's the first point. So Tony Tucker could very well have got phone calls from the girlfriend and answered one, and it would not show, right? That's the first point to be made. The second point is a really important point, which is Pat Tate's phone. Pat Tate's phone was digital, was capable of being cell-sighted, was capable of all the analytics that were available at that time, right? So what happened was Tate's phone was, or the data for Pat Tate's phone was available to Essex Police straight after the murders. Now, whether that was because Essex Drug Squad had already applied for it because of the investigation, they were, Operation Cluster, which was their investigation into Tucker, Tate and Rolfe in relation to drugs dealing, whether it's because of that or because they applied for it after the murders, there is a version of Pat Tate's phone data, version 1. That's version 1, right? Nobody has ever seen version 1 of Pat Tate's phone data. Nobody. It was never disclosed to the defence. It's never been disclosed to anybody, right? That's the point to be made. What they then did, Essex Police, and you've got to ask yourself a question why they did it, was they then made a second application for the phone data for Pat Tate's phone, version 2, but they time limited it to 1844. So 1844, the last phone call, they say, between Sarah Saunders and Pat Tate, 1844 to 1848, 3 minutes 47 seconds, they asked for Pat Tate's phone data to be time limited to 1844 because they say there are no calls after that time. That's what they say. And so that is the evidence that is submitted to the jury, the judge and the court, and obviously disclosed to defence. Version 2, right? We've asked for version 1, they won't supply it. The defence have asked for version 1, they won't supply it. So the big question here is, are there phone calls made by Pat Tate to or from his phone after 1844? And if so, who made them? Where was he? And why has nobody disclosed them? Right? Well, if version 1 of Pat Tate's phone shows that he was actually still moving around, either through cell site or through telephone calls that he was receiving and making, that blows Darren Nichols' evidence out the window. It blows the whole murder case out the window. Okay, so we have been pushing hard to get version 1 of Pat Tate's phone. Right, you can't get it. Essex Police refused to disclose it, right? We honestly believe, or we don't honestly believe, we know there were calls made to Pat Tate's phone. We know there were. Claire Carey, for one. The chap who was sitting outside, the car thief, likely was phoning Pat Tate's phone. Plus there was, I think, Barry Dorman phoned Pat Tate's.
That was the next day.
That was the next day. But there were calls, we know there were calls to Pat Tate's phone. So why have they never been disclosed, and what hasn't been disclosed by Essex Police? That's a really important point. The third thing that only came up not that long ago is that we have someone talking to us from a police officer in charge of the technical support unit who examined the phones that were recovered from the scene. And he says that a bag, an exhibits bag, turned up at the technical support unit at Chelmsford, and inside that bag was, in the bottom of it was blood, and inside the bag, inside with the blood, were 3 phones, not 2, 3 phones. That's what he says. He says that they examined 3 phones. Now, only 2 phones have ever been disclosed in evidence. One is the analogue phone of Tucker, and the other is the digital phone of Pat Tate. So if he's right, and I'm not saying, you know, this is what he's telling us, where's that 3rd phone? We know that Rolf's phone disappeared. No one's ever seen it. We know he did have a phone, categorically had a phone. We spent bloody a year looking for it, didn't we? Because we knew that Rolf had been nicked twice the week before, or in the week before he was murdered. Once by the Met and once in Essex. So we wondered whether or not the phone had been seized at that time. But it now appears, or we think, there's no evidence to prove it, there was a 3rd phone, and was that Rolf's phone? And if so, has that been deliberately withheld again, not disclosed? Because again, that would show potentially that Craig Rolfe was alive after 1859. If you add to that the evidence of the people, the sightings at the pub, we've got a new witness who corroborates the evidence of Armstrong, who gave evidence at trial and said that he had seen Craig Rolfe with a unknown individual, or known individual, I think he says, well-known individual.
He didn't know him.
He didn't know him, okay. I think the earlier one was where they knew him. Yeah. But Armstrong gave evidence saying that he saw Craig Rolfe in the pub at about 8 o'clock, yeah? And the barrister was able, the QC was able to get him to admit that that was either Tuesday or Wednesday. It could have been Tuesday or Wednesday. The new witness says, no, it was Wednesday. I saw him at the same pub as Armstrong talks about. I saw him on the Wednesday. And
outside the pub?
Outside the pub, on the phone, 8 o'clock, after 8 o'clock. So there's more new corroborating evidence that Craig Rolfe was still alive and on his phone after 1859. So you've got some serious questions to be asked of Essex Police. Why will they not disclose version 1 of Pat Tate's phone? And where the bloody hell is that 3rd phone that was examined by the TSU?
That's why it needs a forensic review, because we're getting told things, and the only way to accept for us either way is, let's look at the bag that was examined, let's look at what the forensic expert has done about it, and hopefully the answer will be on the file held at Huntington. Another one for me, if you're into criminality, you ain't going to be using your own phone. You're going to be using a burner. And I've heard the word burner has come up so many times in the last 4 years when it looks at what they were doing. So no calls after 1844, so what? Yeah, for me, they could easily have been using burners. Yeah, simple as that. And if you're into criminality, yeah, you're not going to be daft enough to use your own phone to talk to somebody you're doing a deal with that night. So that's one answer to it. Burners may well have been used, and the criminals would have known that and taken it with them. There's also, if you look at what Brian Rolfe was saying, that there was guns, that Craig Rolfe had a gun the night before because he saw it in the vehicle on the 5th, I think it was. So where is his gun? That has never been recovered. Was that in the Range Rover, and it was taken by the criminals who were responsible for the murders? So that's where we are with it. It needs a forensic review.
And there's one other thing, is the other thing that's never been disclosed is the Pat Tate used telephone kiosks to make his dirty calls. The telephone kiosk at the end of his road, we know he definitely made phone calls from there. It's Timberlock Lane, isn't it?
Correct.
Essex Police were asked to get the
billings for
the
that
billings for that telephone kiosk, and they claimed that they were unable to do so, which is bullshit, because you can get a telephone billing for a telephone kiosk all day long.
Yep.
So there's something that's not quite right around the telephones. They're all, plus on top of that, the actual schedules that were produced for court have been manipulated. Calls have been missed off deliberately. So if you take, for instance, the 1830 call to Paul Edwards, not on the telephone schedules.
1826.
1826.
Yeah,
it's not on the telephone schedules that were produced in court. Yeah. How's that right?
But what they've done there, what the Crown are saying, what the officers and the telephone unit are saying, they've only used the calls between certain people in the schedule that was presented to the jury. And if you look at, if the jury knew that Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were at Gordon Road at 1808, and they knew that at 1826 within the Lynden cell site that Tate was on the phone to Paul Edwards, and Paul Edwards was in Ockenden, yeah, then that would have added to, well, where did they go after that? You with me? Look at where they were, and that would give weight to what I'm saying. If it did happen, 1830 is the only sensible time that the victims and suspects came together, if Nichols was telling the truth. And then you then look at the timeline after that, and it doesn't fit. So in relation to this, the JMW2 schedule of calls made that went to the jury, they should have, for me, looked at all of them and presented all of them and just highlight the ones that were relevant and allow the others to be there to see where they were at, what the calls that were made. But you just don't stop at 1844 and there's nothing after that. You with me? They would have been. We know that there was people trying to get hold of them, as you've already said. You've got Claire and you've got the guy as well. So I think we said enough.
Yep. So the next question, I think we've already covered this one. It's from Astro. Says there's rumours TTR carried out an armed robbery on a safe house in Southend, which belonged to some heavies shortly before they were shot. Could that be connected? We sort of covered that, didn't we?
Yeah.
We think it is connected, but you've raised it.
Yeah. It's it was a flat above a pub, and they robbed some very, very serious, probably the most serious players of a significant amount of drugs.
Who used to live opposite Mr. Jasper. Yeah. Next.
Our next question is from BXF. Strange there is no witnesses who saw the Passat. It would have turned in and out of that lane at night, and Nichols said he dropped off two guys on the A130 in a lay-by.
What a great question. Absolutely spot on. Where's the tyre marks as well? And if you listen to what Nichols says, he said he dropped him off on the left-hand side in the busy rush hour traffic. He'd been hit up the backside and caused a traffic jam. There's nowhere to park on the grass verge. So you've seen that from the photograph. So great question.
And next one is from Essex Harry. Looking at the position of Tate and Tucker's hands, could it be possible that they were tied or cuffed up before the shooting?
There would have been marks on the wrists at the post-mortem that identified that. I don't think so, but I've already said that I'm not happy with the hand and feet position. So good question in some respects, but I don't think they were tied up. For me, they weren't.
Okay, next question is from Stephen O'Shea. If they ever get proven not guilty, what happens to Nichols? We've already covered that. Yeah. Question from Mark Garbutt. They claim that the police have withheld phone calls from Tony Tucker and Pat Tate after 7 p.m. Both the actual mobiles were forensically examined and in the phone's memories on the last dialed numbers. There are no numbers in either phone's memory after 7 p.m. If as they claim both were still alive after 7 p.m, could that be the case?
I think we just answered that, but number one, just as I just said, there were 3 phones, not 2. The issue and concern is that we know that the phone data evidence has been manipulated, so you can't trust it. You know, without seeing without seeing the source documents and without seeing Tate's version 1, you can't trust the evidence that's been presented. It's as simple as that.
Okay, next question's from Mark Harris. Is or was Albert involved in the Warren Slaney case? If not, he really should be.
Who?
I don't know, Warren Slaney?
I recognise the name, you know, just from social media, but no, I wasn't. And being brutally honest, I've got enough on my plate at the moment. But what I will do, I will look it up and see, you know, if there is anything I know about it. So the answer is I wasn't, and I'm getting too old to get involved in any other cases other than one, which is Sandy Percival's case.
Next one is from Wesley. What's TMI's thoughts on if the killer blew the 3 away? Would he really have let Nichols, a witness, alive? Left Nichols, the witness, alive, who could get you put away?
He didn't need Nichols. Why didn't he need Nichols?
Yeah, I mean, you got to go back to the whole. You know, the whole thing is such a load of nonsense.
Yeah.
You know, why would Mick Steele, who,
if he did want to blow him away,
if he was really going to commit this assassination, you know, Mick Steele is no fool, right? He had run Customs and Excise, and to a certain extent, the police ragged.
Yep.
For months and months and months.
Years and years.
He is not stupid. Yep. You know, he's an engineer. He, you know, why would Mick Steele use a VW Passat that was leaking oil everywhere, that kept breaking down, as a getaway car worth 50 quid, was a scrapper? Why would he do that? You know, Jack Williams, maybe he would use Jack Williams, but Jack Williams is hardly, you know, your killer. He's a bloody car mechanic. He's going to rely on a car mechanic to pull the trigger and kill 3 of the most violent men, you know, in that area. And you're going to be totally reliant on that Jack Williams, your mate, to pull the trigger in those circumstances. You know, and you're then going to go to this man, Darren Nichols, who at best is a water mitty, tells lies, involved in drugs dealing, bit of a low life. Why are you going to go and ask Darren Nichols to become a driver and take that risk?
Ask John Wooms. Much closer to the family, much closer to Jack.
Yeah,
Jack.
Why wouldn't you go?
John's not going to snitch him, is he?
The whole thing is such. If you just sit down and use your common sense, you know, Mick Steele is not going to use Jack Williams as the assassin, and he's not going to use Darren Nichols as a driver. It's a complete and utter nonsense. It's fictition. It's made up by Darren Nichols, and unfortunately swallowed hook, line, and sinker because, you know, by Essex Police, primarily because of 1 or 2 other individuals.
Naming them. Next one.
Okay, next question is from Liona. Why was there no sightings of the 3 after 7 p.m. and why were there no calls made on their phones after 7 p.m?
Well, we covered this. You know, the point is there were sightings. The reality was that there were sightings, and the police never followed them up or investigated them.
Or knew about them, in fairness.
Well, they knew about at least 2 of them.
They didn't know about the key one, though.
Well, no, they did. He phoned.
Oh, yeah, of course he did.
Phoned.
Yeah.
No. So you've got this really important sighting, which, you know, 3 men in a car after 11 o'clock that night. They were overtaken, cut up by Tucker, Tate and Rolfe in the Range Rover, and they came side by side and literally saw them, literally side by side. And Michael phoned Essex Police and left a message after the murders. He saw it on TV, and his missus went, "Look at that," and he's gone, "That's the car that cut me up last night." He phoned Essex Police. He left a message for Essex Police. Essex Police never contacted him, never got back to him. It wasn't until many years later that bizarre circumstances that the solicitor for Steele and Wombs got into his cab outside the court in Chelmsford, and he told the solicitor this story. He then went on to do an interview with a former police officer and the solicitor, 4 half-hour tapes, or 45-minute tapes, where he explains the whole story. They then submit that evidence to the CCRC. The CCRC then take them in, interview them, take formal witness statements, which have never been disclosed, and then the CCRC completely write off that evidence. They gave no reason for it at all. In fact, the wording is, we cannot understand why these people would be saying this.
Yeah. Well, the words used were plausible. It was a plausible account.
It's a plausible account. But you've got 3 men there, completely independent, decent, hard-working men, on their way to work, who say categorically, Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were in the Range Rover, they overtook us, we were in a road rage incident. And interestingly, it was never put on Sky, but I interviewed Michael down at the scene, at the roundabout. And while we're standing there, he said, you know what? He said, Dave, he said, I remember, he said, red round his neck. The bloke in the passenger seat, front passenger seat, had red round his neck. He said, I can remember it now. And this is how many 20-something years later. I said, no, I don't remember any red round the neck. He said, no. He said, no, definitely, I remember red round the neck. Anyway, came back, sat down with you, opened up the scene, the photographs, post-mortem photographs, there it is. The inside of Tucker's jacket has a red lining and it's folded over. He's remembered that 20-something years later. It's stuck in his head. He remembered the index number, or that there were 2 4s in the index number. These are people, they've got no reason to lie. They're just, he's a cabbie. I spoke to his mate. No reason to lie. They say categorically, we saw Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, no doubt about it, in the Range Rover after 11 o'clock that night. That's the first one. You've then got the new witness who sees Craig Rolfe at the same pub as Armstrong. Literally, Craig Rolfe walks in front of her car on the phone in front of her, 8 o'clock at night. You've then got the original evidence from the Fortune of War pub, which has never been, Essex Police never investigated. You've got a sighting of them alive after 8 o'clock there, and you've got the sighting at the Orsett Cock. Again, never been investigated. So you have a series of sightings. Plus, the other important one that's been missed is who picked up the VW Polo. The only person who could have picked up the VW Polo was Pat Tate, and you know the garage owner sees the Range Rover literally across the road from the garage at 18:30 odd.
Now, 1808, 1805 was the time in his written statement.
No, but
later it's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, 9 o'clock.
Yeah. So someone picked up the VW Polo. That the only person who could have picked that up would be Pat Tate. So you've got all of these big questions.
Okay, next question is from Duck Alive. Are the North London gangs being totally dismissed in this case?
No. Next.
Okay, next one's from Knightley. Was the White Sierra owned by police drug squad?
No, it was Essex Drug Squad's car. It was there were 2 of them. One was on permanent loan to the Regional Crime Squad, number 5 Regional Crime Squad based at Brentwood, and the other was held by TSU and was used by the Essex Drug Squad on occasions.
Yep.
Okay, next question's from Alan Easy. Nigel Benn's manager Peter DeFreitas denies knowing Tucker, but clearly is this relevant?
Well, Jasper mentions Peter DeFreitas, doesn't he?
I've read his statement, and I need to refresh my memory. Peter DeFreitas was interviewed. He was Ben's manager, wasn't he? Nigel Benn's manager, and he would have known Tucker because Tucker was his security. So not quite sure where that information is, but I'd invite him to come back to me with some more information.
Okay, next question's from Kensington. Why is Mick still not allowed to talk about the case and his side of the story? Surely you're allowed to plead your innocence to media.
Well, he is talking to us because we've spoken to him, not sure what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks if he has a gagging order placed on him, the same as Jack Rooms. He's done that through his solicitor. He's appealed so many times to the CCRC now. Maybe one day that he will. If he comes out and he does talk and it's part of his conditions, all that's going to do is put him back inside. So hopefully he's not daft enough to do that. Maybe one day, listen, he's getting old. He's 82 years of age, so his health is not what it could be or should be. Same as me. I'm 75 and getting, past my best health. And obviously I've got issues that I've got to be careful with. So as you get older.
Yeah, I know he was mentioned. He's mentioned in Billy Jasper's 12-page statement. He says one of the three in the Range Rover owed Patsy Clark £300,000 from stolen cash from the Security Express robbery. He was Peter DeFrace's his mate, working on doors and doing a bit of minding. Yeah. This cash was to be laid down. Until...
But I've read Peter DeFrace's statement.
Right.
And we know that. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. So
it just shows you there's a link between.
yeah, there is. So where was I? Sorry.
So I know where you were. The reality is that Mick still can talk at the moment, but he's category A, so you can't get to talk to him unless it's all arranged and agreed, which is quite laughable because recently someone was on social media shouting across the prison walls as if they were talking to Mick Steele. Bit of a clown, but Mick Steele is category A. You will get nowhere near him. It has to be months in advance arranged and agreed. If he gets out, he will probably get hit with the same conditions as Jack Womes, that he cannot talk to the media. He will not, post that. He will not talk to anybody who's even related to the media. So, but the difference is Jack's complied with it. Mick is a man who is very, very strongly trying to prove his innocence, isn't he? Jack has sort of come out and got on with his life, whereas Mick Steele is absolutely adamant he will prove his innocence. Adamant he will prove his innocence.
Okay, next question is from Mark Pelle. Were any of the original Essex police involved with any of the known criminal gangs?
Yes. Yeah, do you want me to go into detail? Or?
Well, the answer to that is yes, but you with me? Where's it taken us?
Well, it opens up a can of worms, because the answer to the question is yes, and it's not just one or two. No, there's relationships, really unpleasant relationships between serious organised criminals and Essex police officers, and furthermore, there's big issues between Essex police officers and informants who were serious and major criminals, and so there's a lot of material that we've got that we couldn't even consider talking about. There's stuff that's in the public domain, but there's other material that exists that raises real concerns about who was pulling whose chain around this whole case.
Yeah, I'm just being careful, David, because the last thing I want to do is for us to get into trouble for something we've said that we shouldn't have said. Yeah. And we've got to be careful of that.
We're nearly there. We've got 8 more questions. my batteries are running, both flashing.
Go on, then we'll try to be quick.
The next question is from Jenna. Why won't Sarah Saunders talk? Don't you think it's funny that she was meant to be Pat's missus, but she was giving tips off to Nipper and Mick Steele of what Pat was planning to do, etc.?
Well, she wasn't. The reality is that that's not true. Yeah, if you speak to Mick Steele and you speak to Sarah, and we have spoken to Sarah numerous times, that's not true. She was not. All of that story about, all the evidence that was put forward by the police, not true, and they put her under immense pressure. Yeah. Plus,
just read an interview.
Yeah, and you've got to remember as well.
It comes more from the film, doesn't it? Where
it's not true, and furthermore, you've got to remember, Essex police have bugged her house. They bugged her house. They never disclosed any of that either, because that material would prove
her boyfriend's house.
Or bugged her boyfriend's house, but that material would probably prove their innocence as well.
Yeah.
Next question from Jackson. So many prisoners getting released early now due to no prison space. Why do they seem to want to hold Mick after he's already served his tariff?
There's a question. That's the $1 million question.
I think the defence team describe him as a political prisoner, because if he does get out and he does talk, God, it's going to be some story.
Yeah, I mean, the reality of this is, if this comes out, this is going to be one of, if not the biggest miscarriage of justice cases,
Yep.
and it's going to blow policing's, integrity out of the water.
Okay, next question's from Kevin Lowe. Who is the black man people talk about on social media whose name is never mentioned, and why can you not disclose it, please?
It's Gilbert Winter, and it's irrelevant.
One we've covered.
If that's the one, then
Yeah.
it is disclosed and
Yeah.
it's been talked about on social media.
Yeah.
We're nearly there, guys. Last few. James C asks, as it is well known that Kevin Whitaker was murdered by Craig and Holland, can you confirm his death still down as an overdose, or has it been changed to a murder?
No, I think it's still down as it's not a murder. There's never been a murder investigation.
Nope. But the one thing that the magistrate sits in the coroner's court, the coroner's office, the coroner's magistrate
Of course, yeah.
was concerned about what he heard at the hearing, and he did make contact with the incident room, didn't he? Or did he? There was something there.
The coroner raised concerns, but it's never been investigated as a murder. And the reality is that obviously, until very recently, when Brian Rolfe came out, but if Brian Rolfe's evidence is to be believed, Brian Rolfe would prove who was involved in the murder of Kevin Whitaker, the true story of the murder of Kevin Whitaker.
Okay, next question is from Tennyson's. You said in a previous interview that Patsy Clark ordered the hit. Is this still the case, and does this fall into the Billy Jasper theory?
Yeah, well, yes and yes. I mean, it's we can only say what the evidence that's put forward, and the evidence of Billy Jasper is that Patsy Clark's was what he was told. Right,
Yeah,
let's get that right.
That's right.
What Billy Jasper understood to be the case, and the evidence that Billy Jasper put forward as being the case, was that as far as he was concerned, he was part of that.
He ordered the hit.
That he ordered the hit, and that's what he was involved in. Jasper was involved in driving the assassin to the scene, and in discussions about the murders with Billy Gale and the assassin and himself. And as far as Billy Jasper was concerned, it was all about Patsy Clark. Whether that's true or not, nobody knows. But the reality is that that's what Billy Jasper said. That's his account. That's his evidence.
From my knowledge of Patsy Clark, he was a sleeping partner of what went on at the Peacock Gym in Canning Town. Yeah, and if you look at who was on the directors list of people who owned or was connected to it, there was a name of Clark that was on the register, correct?
His son.
His son. So you've got that connection, and I know personally from people that I know that he was inside I think at the time or close to the murders, but came out after the Brinksmark. He got 6 or 7 years. So he was around and available to have ordered a contract. And if you look at the people round the table described by David Colston, then one of the best mates of the house where they sat round the table is well and truly connected with Patsy Clark. I'll say no more than that, because obviously, well, Patsy Clark's dead, so you with me, I can say what I believe to be within my knowledge, but there are little snippets that show me that what Colston said may well have been the truth of what happened, and that was part of, the overall aggravation that Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were having.
Okay, 2 more questions. Annab asks, you mentioned before that Bomb had a police handler. Is this still the case, or was that just from history?
Well, we don't know currently what his status is.
No.
I use the word informant. I've described it earlier in the interview that it's who talks to the police is the big issue for me, because whether you're an informant and you say X, and whether you're a reluctant witness and you say X, and whether you're a person of interest and say X, they all end up in saying the same thing, don't they? Whether you're an informant or you're just talking to the police or you're not prepared to make a statement but you've said something. For me, it's all about what is the truth of what you're saying. Yeah, I very much doubt if he is currently a registered chiz. Yeah, chiz is a new word for informant, but he most certainly would have been looked at for help because he was the main bouncer in Raquel's when it came to the Leah Betts death. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So we'll leave it there, shall we?
Okay, last question from Mark Garnett. Are TMI not worried going against corrupt Essex police officers who are still at large?
Not worried. Not worried insofar as no. I would. The answer to that is they have already tried. We've fortunately we've had Essex police officers talking to us, and we have already. We were tipped off very early on, weren't we, that there were meetings being held by one of the most senior people, who's not a serving officer now, but is a civilian. There were meetings being held with anybody wrapped around this case to tell them, keep your mouth shut. So that was very early on. Subsequent to that, we've had other people feeding back into us, and we've seen stuff on social media. And then there's been a deliberate attempt by certain individuals to pull out Essex police officers to try and undermine our evidence. Obviously they tried to put Dibley up, didn't they? And another former DCI from Essex to undermine our evidence or our investigation. So the answer to that is
yes and no.
The answer is yes and no. I mean, the reality is, listen, they can do what they like. The truth is the truth, and we're not here to. We're doing this. We go back to the very beginning. Why are we doing this? We're not doing this because we're earning any money out of it. It's causing us a pain in the backside, to be totally honest with you. But it's the right thing to do, and we're 5 years into this now, and hopefully, touch wood, the truth will come out. Mick Steele will get his parole, and the CCRC will put this back before the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal will listen to all the evidence and come to the right conclusion. But who knows? And at that stage, hopefully some people might turn around and wind their necks in and apologise.
The interesting question for me would be, okay, it goes to Court of Appeal, and for the second time, Michael Steele and Jack Williams gets the proper result, which is not guilty of murder, guilty as hell of importation, and that's what sucked him into the murder, in my view. It's what Essex Police do about the result of what happens at Court of Appeal. No point in even dreaming about it now, but if they get off at the Court of Appeal, what do Essex Police do about it? And they will probably say, well, the right decision was made and we're not going to do anything. Or are they really interested in the truth? The issues that we raise need an investigation. I'm happy to sit down with I've got the time. David hasn't. He's a busy man. He's got a company to run, and he's doing lots of good stuff elsewhere around London. So David doesn't have the time. I've got the time. I've got loads of paperwork. I've had 5 years of my review experience put into this case. I'm happy to brief an officer with a warrant card to say this is what I've uncovered. I'm hard-nosed enough to say, okay, I might have got that wrong, but there are recommendations and things that need to be done that can still be done today that would uncover the truth of the 6/7th of December 1995. And we're both of agreement that Nichols, for whatever reason, conned, hoodwinked, got into bed with police officers and said things that they've been sucked into. The word corruption I don't like. Yeah, I hate it, and it should never be accepted in any way, shape or form. and that needs to be bottomed out as well. But you need evidence for that, and it's all about evidence. And one day, the truth hopefully will come out.
Thank you, guys. We'll wind it up there. Thank you ever so much for sharing your questions and answers with us.
So where we sit at the moment is that Mick Steele's parole hearing is about to be heard and the decision made, and the CCRC, Criminal Cases Review Commission, have now got our report, and hopefully will require the evidence to support that report, and following that we hope that the matter will then get put before the Court of Appeal, in which case we will be happily attend to give evidence on behalf of Steele and Wombs. The fact is, we're not going to give this up. There is new evidence coming in literally on a weekly basis, new witnesses, and at some stage the truth will come out, and even if it doesn't get put before the Court of Appeal, if it comes down to it, we will publish everything we've got, put it all in the public domain, and the public can make their own mind up. But that's where we stand at the moment.